Michael, thank you for joining, man. We've had the opportunity to connect in person and participate on a panel together. Shout out to Trusted Advisor. And I highly respect your work and knowledge of this industry. But to start, for people who might not be familiar with you or your firm, can you kind of explain your role in this world of sports assets and some of the work you're doing to help high net worth individuals get into this lane?
Sure, sure. Thanks for having me. First of all, it's always a pleasure to speak to you and obviously to talk about subject matters that we're both really interested in. My name is Mike Rueda. I'm a corporate partner at a global law firm called Withers Bergman. We're headquartered out of London. I'm based in our New York City office. Withers, like I said, is a global firm. It's predominantly a private client firm. So what that means is we do a lot of private client work. So trust and estate planning, international tax, domestic tax, for ultra high net worth individuals, families, family offices, and their businesses. I'm part of the corporate group that does a lot of corporate work for those businesses and the individuals themselves and the family offices, anywhere ranging from starting companies to selling and buying companies to raising money, investing in all sorts of businesses and funds, things of that nature. I am also the head of our sports and entertainment practice in the United States. I work with companies in those industries that are, raising money, operating, buying companies, selling divisions, selling assets. I work with investors that are investing in sports franchises, sports adjacent businesses, entertainment businesses. Basically, any kind of corporate work or commercial work that touches the sports and entertainment industry, companies, investors, owners, operators, we work on. And then also we work with a lot of talent in those industries. So anyone from athletes, artists, entertainers, people behind the camera, behind the scenes in music, producers, people like that. We work with predominantly on helping them operate their professional businesses, right? Whatever that may be for them. I work with them a lot on structuring their businesses and commercial activities, and then obviously our firm does all the private client work, so we end up doing a lot for them personally, right, in their personal lives. So it's a unique firm in the landscape of big global law firms, but it's kind of uniquely positioned to help me do the work that I do.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for the context, man. And obviously, looking at sports, it's a fun, sexy industry to be in, and a lot of people wanna be in it because of that. But from a business perspective, can you kind of dive into the details as to some of the conversations you're having as to why, from a like through a business lens, people are interested in investing in this asset class?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we have a lot of different conversations with different types of people. Obviously if you read the news, you see how sports assets and particularly franchise values in the US have grown significantly. And it really has become a proper asset class that investors and fund operators are looking to deploy capital into. So a lot of our clients, being who they are looking for opportunities, not just in established leagues, but also emerging leagues and other sports properties, because of the growth and potential, anything from media and technology to real estate. There's so much going on in the world of sports that has become a really attractive asset class for all types of clients. So, again, that could be anyone from an individual who's started a company, has been really successful, sold a company, or is, just a really unique position in life where they have a lot of excess capital that they can deploy to become a significant owner in a franchise, or other folks who are successful themselves but are looking for ways to become involved in the sports community, right? Whether it's investing in some sports technology company or some new development, multi-use property. that someone's developing for a new franchise in an emerging league. So there are different ways people are looking to get involved. And obviously, with all the differences in opportunities, right, people can come in at different price points. But ultimately, for us, it's helping them achieve their goal of becoming whether it's just being a passive investor or an investor and an operator. So there are different opportunities. And then, because of what we do, I've been working with a lot of, founders in the space, people who are starting new properties, new ventures, new companies, targeting these industries or the sports industry specifically. So, we're helping those people navigate the space, raise money, operate their company. So that we're involved in it in a lot of different angles, which is great because we get to see a lot of what's going on in the space across the board.
Yeah, and to that point, like obviously you're dealing with multi-million, sometimes multi-billion-dollar transactions. These are very complex deals with a lot of different stakeholders and parties involved. For someone who might not really understand kind of the legality behind it, what are some of the challenges from a legal perspective that can come into play with some of these transactions?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what the transaction is. I know we've sat in a panel about sports ownership. Those transactions, and it may not matter, the check size, they can be a bit complex because of the nature of the businesses that you're investing in, right? You're investing in a franchise as part of a league. Leagues want to know who owners are, who investors are. There's a lot of diligence that leagues do into new owners. There's a lot of everything from background checks to checks into conflicts of interest that you may have with stakeholders in the league, players in the league, things of that nature. So from a person who's used to we represent a lot of people who are used to having things kept very privately. When you go into sports, there's not a lot you can keep private in terms of how you come into that investment opportunity. Um, you know, Again, there's people when they write a big check, they want to know, hey, not only what am I investing in, but what do I get out of this? Right? What rights do I have? What obligations am I bound by? Right? Am I going to have to put more money in when I'm not necessarily sure I want to? Um, and then if you become part of an ownership group, like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of complexities depending on the nature of the transactions themselves, right? Um, if you're a part of a group of investors investing into a sports franchise, and I'm just using that as an example, right? Even agreements within your own investment group, right? There's a lot of, okay, who's leading this group and who's calling the shots, who's making significant decisions, what are our obligations within the group before you even get to negotiate with the other side, right? The party that you're buying the interest from. So there are layers of complexities, but that's what they pay us to get involved with.
Yeah.
And it's every transaction's a bit different. Every investment opportunity or business is different, but um, you know, fortunately we do quite a bit of it. We rarely see something completely out of the ordinary, but yeah, there, like any other investment, there are unique challenges, but you know, we're there to address them.
I'm curious how you think about risk mitigation because obviously this is alternative asset, and even when you're looking at investing here in the states as opposed to maybe investing in a soccer club in
Mhm.
Europe, you have to deal with regulation and promotion over there, so it's kind of a different ball game that you're playing. But where does kind of if you're someone who's looking to invest in team ownership, how does that kind of fit within a portfolio or your kind of overall um investment opportunity, like from a risk perspective?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, I'd say the people that we're working with when they're approaching this type of investment, they've got, and I say generally because there are one-off cases, right? This is not going to, at this day and age, this is not going to be, their primary, or most valuable asset, right? They've made enough wealth right? In most cases, we're talking about bigger investments into established leagues, right? Or even they're going to be the primary investor in one of the emerging leagues. It's a significant amount of money, but these folks they've earned money in other areas, right? So they've made the decision that we're we're diversified enough, or whatever it may be. I'm not a financial advisor or investment banker, but we've got enough cash that we can invest or support this new venture, and we're going to be okay. If this league, I wouldn't say it folds, but if valuations don't continue to increase, we're going to be okay, or increase at the rate that they have, right? So people who are usually getting into this have decided this is what they want to do. They diversified enough they can allocate the capital to this, right? Obviously, emerging leagues have their own complexities, their own challenges. They're growing, they're building stadiums, they're trying to find all, different sources of revenue to keep the leagues growing in the right direction, right? And we've seen steady growth with leagues that have trended really positively in the last couple of years. The WNBA, the NWSL, some of the other leagues around, right? Major League Soccer was a relatively new league, maybe a couple decades ago, but you know things tend to trend in the right direction. And I think the way that the leagues are structured offers a bit of stability. Whereas, to your point, in Europe, there's nuanced challenges with respect to the way that stadiums are owned, promotion and relegation, to your point, the way, TV contracts are negotiated or split amongst teams. So things like that. So, I mean, we have our own challenges here, right? We have a lot of different sports to choose from, right? There's a lot both from an investor's perspective and also from a consumer's perspective, right? We can watch basketball, soccer, football, we have all these different competing interests. In some of the other countries, England, it's really just soccer. So every investment opportunity comes with its own bit of risk, but yeah, I mean, I think ultimately people are valuing it, or making decisions based on, what they've already done and what the venture looks like. I mean, and again, I think the difference is many years ago, and you see this with a lot of the owners that are selling now, legacy, there are a lot of legacy owners where the team itself, right, that's their most valuable asset. That's why you see some of them selling, right? They have children who want them to, liquidate this asset, right? They don't want to own it. They don't want this owner to pass away, and the ownership is split among trusts, and you got one son that's now the general partner. They want this, they want the current owner to either sell all of it or sell an interest in it because they want the cash, right? So I think the owners that are approaching the space now have cash from other sources, right? This is on top of that. It's not their primary asset.
How do these deals typically happen for like someone who doesn't understand? Because obviously this is not like buying a publicly traded company
Yeah.
on the S&P 500 or anything of that nature. Like these deals are primarily relationship driven, but from like I guess a high level background perspective, like how does this kind of these deals kind of come to the table for someone who's interested in investing in a team?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the deal. I mean, a lot of them, there are bankers out there that know about deals, right? Minority interests that are being shopped around that can help you find the right type of deal for you. I mean, some of the bigger, higher profile deals, right? You're right, they're relationship based, right? Or maybe like you see with the Giants, there's a proposal to sell, and somebody's marketing that and trying to find the right investment group, right? It depends, it depends on the size of the deal, the asset, the team, the league, right? But you're right, a lot of it is relationship driven. I mean, I can say the last couple of deals we've worked on, right, we worked with an investor that was a participant in a consortium, a large consortium that took over an NBA team, right? The principals of that consortium had a relationship with the majority owner that was selling the majority interest, and that's how the conversation got started. And then from there, that the leaders of that consortium, right, they built out the consortium. They knew our clients, or our client had an interest, and it was relationship based as well. Similarly, we worked with another individual who bought a minority interest in a sports team, in a top four league team, and that person purchased a minority interest because he knew the general partner, and they knew the general partner wanted to sell, and he really wanted to get involved, and he continues to want to get more involved, right? And again, that was relationship based. So I think a lot of those conversations happen because of the circle of people that tend to run together. They know each other, they know the asset, it's community. But then you got, like I said, there's bankers and folks who are out there looking to sell interest when they know people, want to sell, and there may be a market for buyers. That's their role.
When you look at the top four leagues in the US, at least, do you think we've reached the peak of valuations? And if not, what are your thoughts on the future of buying and selling teams? Do you think high net worth individuals or family offices will kind of get pushed to the side and only private equity will be able to play in this space?
I As to whether we've reached the peak evaluations, I don't think so. I mean, as long as we continue to find different ways to generate revenue, right? The assets themselves evolve, stadiums evolve, right? People are finding new ways to generate revenue. So I think that we'll always see growth, right? Will it grow as rapidly? That I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not the one that's paid to make those kinds of decisions, but look, I think private equity plays a role, right? I think people want accountable owners. Not that funds can't be, but in our space, I think you have enough wealth in this country and globally that you'll have, you know, groups of investors, if not individuals, right, who can operate some of these teams, right, and fill out the cap table with other types of investors, some private equity, some not, right, to continue to run these teams. Um, so I don't think private equity will push us out, or will push out, right, traditional types of ownership groups. And like you see now, right, with some of the recent deals, they're private, groups formed for the purpose of owning a particular team. I think private equity will play a role. It adds a bit of liquidity for people who are looking to sell their interests, and I think that's a good thing. So yeah, I don't think the construct of ownership will change too much.
Yeah. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of you talked about celebrities and even athletes who are getting involved in ownership groups. I think a good example is like Ryan Reynolds with
Yeah.
Wrexham. Obviously LeBron in Liverpool and his involvement in Fenway. Can you dive into like the value that celebrities and athletes bring to the table when they're able to have a seat at the table and have a stake in some of these teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of from what we've seen, right? I'm no expert on what their abilities are, but I mean, from what we've seen, based on some of the examples that you've given, right, with Ryan Reynolds, right, there's more than, LeBron brings up certain perspectives. Someone, like Reynolds brings a different perspective and different opportunities, right? His ability to cast light on this small team that was probably unheard of to most of us in the US, right? And really transform the team and community because he put so much focus on them. Obviously, he brought capital, but he brought other, sponsors and things that he was able to connect because of who he was. So I think you see the value in someone like that, right? You see other celebrities joining who may have a smaller percentage of a team, but the value that they bring to an organization. David Beckham with Miami, right? His contacts within the sport transform that roster, transform that expansion franchise because of who he was and his cachet and his marketability and his connections. LeBron, same thing. With Fenway, there's a certain cachet that he brings. Has he fully capitalized on it with Fenway and Liverpool? Who knows? But right, I mean, guys busy playing and trying to win championships still, so it's a little bit different. But yeah, I think there's unique value that, athletes, artists, celebrities bring when they form part of an ownership group, right? And we also see it in some of the emerging leagues, right? How
Yeah.
many athletes, non-soccer athletes, are owning NWSL clubs, which is a great thing. You bring attention to the sport, to the team, obviously capital, but I think it's a plus. I mean, for us to work with athletes, I enjoy it. I was a former athlete, but to see athletes sort of giving back to in different ways to another sport, particularly women's sports, I think is really amazing. And I think it does a lot of good for the sport itself.
Yeah, 100%. Uh, Reflecting on the clients that you work with and your experience in this space, are there any specific emerging trends or things around sports investment that you're starting to see, whether it's around media or technology that you think has a lot of upside within like the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily trends in what they're doing, but trends in the way that they're approaching the activity in general. I mean, I've been a lawyer for almost 20 years, and I've been working in the sports and entertainment and industry as a lawyer for probably 10 plus years. And just the level of sophistication that I see now in the way that I'd say talent. I work with a lot of athletes, but talent in general, the way that they approach their investment activities, put aside just the way that they operate as professionals in their sport or industry, right? That has always been there, but the way that they're approaching their, let's say, off the field life and how they approach investment activity and other business activities, the level of sophistication has increased dramatically, which is to me is amazing to see because it allows them to really fully capitalize on their opportunities. They're hiring good people, they're learning from them, right? And not just lawyers, but like financial people, accountants, the way that they're approaching their business off the field, right? I use off the field loosely. It's in the last 5 years, it's transformative. I think and that's why we see a lot of what's happening and a lot of the stuff we've been talking about because they've recognized their ability to not just deploy capital, but to use their personal brand or connections or whatever to really make a difference in their own business, but the businesses or assets they're affiliated with, right? I think there's a different approach and it's all positive. It's not always the case, but I mean, I think that's why groups like Trusted Advisor exist is to connect people who do this type of work. And it's just good to see, obviously, people in a room like that are there to support our mutual type of clients, but just generally the stuff that falls across my desk now, they're really unique opportunities. And it's just really well thought out, really well put together, really well advised. And that's like the most fundamental trend that I've seen.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate it because it makes it easier for me to do my job.
Yeah, absolutely. Last couple questions as we wind down here. Obviously, there's groups that are trying to democratize ownership within sports, and you have fan funded teams now. Do you see a world where that becomes more of a thing than private ownership in sports?
I don't know if we'll see I guess it depends on the team, right? And the
Yeah,
league, but I don't see it taking over what we currently see. I think we may see more of it, right? Because I think there's always a place for something like that, particularly because people have such a connection to sports and their own franchise, right? To give people an opportunity to feel that sense of ownership and that connection, right? Because it is different when you own something, and people already do. Fans feel like they own their team. You give them an opportunity to actually own a piece, no matter how small, right? It's different. So I think there is a place for it. I think there are platforms and opportunities to make that a reality. And if you can do that in a way that makes sense for fans and owners, I think you can build on that, right? I think there is a place for it. But I don't see it sort of transforming or replacing traditional ownership, right?
yeah, that makes sense. Michael, man, appreciate the insight, appreciate the time. Lastly, can you let people know where they can learn more about you and your firm as well?
Yeah, sure. Our website is withersworldwide.com. My name is Michael Rueda. You can search me there. I'm pretty basic, not a social media guy, so maybe you can find an account here or there, but it's all family photos and food, so there's not much exciting stuff. But yeah, no, thanks for having me. I always love talking about this stuff, and obviously talking to you is always fun.
Thanks, my guy.